and it's connected by a series of bridges that connect it to the mainland. I've lived there since 1976, and I actually built the home that I live in. I drove the nails. I was born in a place called Portchester, New York, which is about 50 miles outside of New York City on the Connecticut border. And so I lived in Portchester, New York, and Connecticut until I was 7, and then my parents moved to Florida. And I've been in the same place ever since. My life is real eclectic because for whatever the reason, I have a lot of different things that I've mastered how to do, which are very extremely diverse. I started out, my hobby was mechanical things, and so when I was young I was racing motorcycles and racing cars, and then I wound up to be a semi-professional race boat driver. I traveled all over the United States racing power boats. Then I became a race producer. I started producing huge outdoor events. Well, then I changed gears and I became a professional artist. And I traveled all over the world with a guy from Southern California whose, strangely enough, his art studio was back to back with Tony's castle. Literally back to back. His studio was the back of Tony's property. And I met him and traveled around the world building sand castles, but not the kind you see kids build at the beach. Castles that were world record and still are in the record books, in the Guinness Book of Records. Castles that were 54, 65 feet high and had a base the size of a football stadium. So I did that for 14 years. I was a race driver for 16 years. I still own a mechanical business in Florida. In about, how long is this? In 2000. I started in the Tony world in 1991. In 2000, I would always sit around with the trainers and the staff, and I would give them all kinds of thought-provoking things I would talk about, and they would be thought-provoked. So, right. So, we were in Australia at David Best. I had done a security briefing. And Vicky St. George, who runs all the trainers, I said, because I would walk by where the trainers eat breakfast in the morning, and they'd always have me in for coffee. And I'd start saying really off-the-wall things to them, like, if I was CEO of the universe, you couldn't get married until you were 30 years old. It wasn't allowed. You weren't allowed to be married before you were 30. And when you got married, a marriage license only lasted for 2 years, and then it expired like a driver's license. And it expired unencumbered. So you couldn't take anything from the other person. Well, I would start coming out with all this stuff. So I told Vicky after the security briefing, I said, I always started talking about some of the stuff I talked to you guys about. And she goes, you want to get on stage with leadership? Okay. I'll give you 2 hours on stage. Well, back then there was 300 people in leadership. So I went, all right. I had no anything. I had no prep. I had no nothing. She goes, what are you going to call it? What are you going to call your presentation? I'm going to call it The Power of Truth. Okay. So I stood on stage 12 years ago for 2 hours, and I talked extemporaneously. I had nothing. And I was watching the people in the room, and this is really interesting because this is not a response I thought I was going to get. Well, I got to the very end. They flashed me from the back of the room, but we have 5 minutes left. And I went, okay, I have to make this personal. It can't be just about me standing up here. It's got to be personal. So I looked at my watch and I went, okay, it's 5 after 8. I challenge everybody in the room to be 100% honest for the next 24 hours. No exceptions. And I ended. Well, in the room that night was a married couple. And the guy happened to be on my security team back then. And his wife was a really good friend of mine. They were in leadership in the audience. So this was my first experience. They were high school sweethearts. 15 minutes after I end, he comes to me. I need your help. Okay. He goes, will you talk to my wife? He said, because after you gave us the challenge, I went outside, I took her out on the golf course, and he said, I told her that I cheated on her so many times I lost count. Will you talk to her? And I went, absolutely. So I went and found her. I walked out on the golf course with her, and I told her 2 things. I said, in your lifetime, you will never understand how difficult it was for him to do that. And she didn't want to hear anything like that. And the second thing I told her, she really didn't want to hear. I said, you look back on this day from some time in the future as probably one of the most valuable days of your whole entire lifetime. Well, she really didn't want to hear that. She moved to the U.S., she left him, moved to the U.S. because I lived in Australia. And it's a long story, I'll shorten it, make it really short. I saw him 6 months later. Have you talked to her? Yeah, I had one conversation. Actually, a period of 2 or 3 years went by, or maybe 4 years went by. The bottom line is, they are remarried, they have an amazing family, they have several children. And I see them still, I see her, I see both of them. She was always going to write a testimonial for me. I said, you remember what I told you that night on the golf course, right? She goes, oh yeah. Yes, I do. And I said, what did you discover? Well, I discovered that there's no substitute for being honest. You can't substitute something else and try to make something work by substituting something. And she said, I discovered that for him to do what he did wasn't done to hurt me, although he knew it would. That's not, it wasn't its purpose. Its purpose wasn't to hurt me. Its purpose was to be honest with me after I'd been dishonest. And even though the truth is painful, it still is the most valuable thing. Now, what was really interesting, for me especially, I was back there, you know, we've been back there several times for David Destiny, and one of the last times, the very lawn that I talked to them both on, right behind the building where the golf course is, that very lawn, that I had the conversation with him when he told me what he did, and with her, they had a blanket laid out, and there they were laying on the blanket with their children laying on this blanket in the very same place that I talked to them like 4 years before or 5 years before. So that was the first time I ever did a presentation, and in a way it kind of backfired because then Tony spoke in leadership after me, and he was saying things and people were raising their hand going, oh yeah, well Gary already talked.